we're going to go over what I have here is the actual write-up of the judge, Judge Engoron, I believe it is, in the Donald Trump New York court case regarding the valuation of his properties. When the judge had stated that Mar-a-Lago was only worth between 18 and $25 million, it was so unbelievable. I had to say, like, did this guy really go and value the property at that much? Or is this just propaganda? No, he actually did. And so I was like, well, how did he come up with that valuation? And I ended up finding the actual write up regarding the case itself. And I'm going to go through this and just expose how laughable this case is. The first thing, when it comes to his SFCs, or the statement of financial conditions, which is what this case is stating, that Trump had fraudulently overvalued his properties in order to obtain loans from a bank. I just saw an article and it said that there's not going to be a jury because this isn't a legal proceeding, it is an equity proceeding. The state is only looking to claw back about $250 million in ill-received gains by the Trump organization. So money that the Trump organization made and benefited from based off of their fraudulent financial disclosures. The problem is there's no victim. And let's say the state does claw this money back. Let's say they find him guilty and they take this money. Where's the money going? What are they using it for? The state can just come after you and say, oh, no, you made $250 million from fraud, so now you have to give us the $250 million that you made. The state had nothing to do with this transaction, which is crazy in itself. But on the front page of the financial disclosures that Trump gave the banks, the very front page, they had what's called a worthless clause that he puts on all of these disclosures. It says assets are stated at their estimated current values and liabilities at their estimated current amounts using various valuation methods. Such valuation methods include, but are not limited to, the use of appraisals, capitalization of anticipated earnings, recent sales and offers, and estimates of current values as determined by Mr. Trump in conjunction with his associates and, in some instances, outside professionals. Considerable judgment is necessary to interpret market data and develop the related estimates of current value. Accordingly, the estimates presented herein are not necessarily indicative of the amount that could be realized upon the disposition of the assets or payments of the related liabilities. The use of different market assumptions and or estimation methodologies may have a material effect on the estimated current value amounts. So what that's saying is that all of the information in this financial disclosure was valued based off of the capitalization of anticipated future earnings, appraisals that they had done, and estimates that came from Donald Trump himself, what he estimated it to be worth. And it says that the bank should go and do their own valuation and completely understand that this valuation is not necessarily the correct one. It says that on the front page of the damn papers that Trump gave them right then and there. He didn't commit fraud. He turned in a paper and said, here's what I think based on this. Here's how I got to it. And you go and figure it out, which is what happens, right? I challenge anyone to do this. Go into your bank and submit a request to borrow money against your house and give the bank your own personal valuation of your home. You can say your home's worth $1 billion and it's a 500 square foot house. If you go in there with your own valuation and give it to them when you're requesting a line of credit or a loan against a collateralized asset, the bank is going to take your valuation. They're going to go wipe their ass with it. Then they're going to come back and they're going to call up their own appraiser and do their own underwriting on the property, obtain their own valuation method, and they're going to lend you money based on that. Why? Because they're the ones taking the risk. They're not, especially when we're talking about millions and billions of dollars, they're not just going to take your word for it. This doesn't happen. You could say, yes, it's illegal to commit fraud, bank fraud, wire fraud. That's different than overvaluing a property when trying to obtain a loan. Why? Because it is up to the person doing the lending. Value is subjective. Value comes from either the market, what someone is willing to pay for something, or what someone is willing to lend for it. That is where value comes from. The defendants further submit the affidavit and disposition transcript of Robert Unnell, who purports to be an expert in commercial real estate, for the proposition of that because of the worthless clause, no lender relies on these for what it is, which should be true. However, the defendant's reliance on these worthless disclaimers is worthless in itself. The clause does not use words worthless or useless or ignore or disregard or any similar words. It does not say, quote, the values herein are what I think the properties will be in 10 or more years. Indeed, the quoted language uses the word current no less than 5 times and the word future 0 times. Now let me go back and read to you that worthless clause again. Assets are stated at their estimated current values, estimated, and liabilities at their estimated current amounts using various valuation methods. Such valuation methods include, but are not limited to, the use of appraisals, capitalization of anticipated earnings, which is the same fucking thing as, quote, the values herein are what I think the properties will be worth in 10 or more years. It's no different. That's what that means. In estimates of current values, this is back to the worthless clause, estimates of current values as determined by Mr. Trump, estimates of current values as determined by Mr. Trump. Is that not the same thing as saying the values herein are what Mr. Trump thinks the properties will be worth in 10 or more years? What are we talking about here? Why is this a case? He told them on the thing. He had all of that written, but because it wasn't in that legal jargon, because our legal system has become something where these attorneys, especially government attorneys, can sit around and do nothing but try and interpret law in such a way that it works in their favor and to bring people up on indictments like Donald Trump for things because it didn't have this exact writing. Let's move on. The next thing to discuss is materiality. The Attorney General says it is settled that a standalone cause of action under Executive Law 63, Section 12 does not require a demonstration of materiality, but merely that an act has the capacity or tendency to deceive or creates an atmosphere conducive to fraud. The plaintiff need not to prove the challenged act or practice was misleading in any material way. They go on to say that the defendants argue that the financial statements were not materially misleading, claiming that inter alia that there is no such thing as objective value. The defendants essentially argue that value is inherently subjective, that because internal brand valuations are in the eye of the beholder, in this case Donald Trump, they cannot be overvalued. Defendants argue that no bank or underwriter would have reasonably been materially misled by any alleged misstatements or omissions of the statement of financial conditions and other information the defendants made available to their counterparties, because no sophisticated counterparty would have considered the SOFCs and other information provided by the defendants alone as material to extend credit or to set an interest rate or issue an insurance policy or price a risk without doing their own due diligence, which is exactly what I just said, right? No bank, especially when it comes to this amount of money, is going to just take your word for it. They're going to go do their own due diligence. And they are right. Value is subjective. Value comes from a negotiating process between the seller who values it at one price and the buyer who values it at another. And if you are willing to find someone that will pay $1 billion for Maralago, Maralago is worth $1 billion. They are valuing Maralago at $18 to $25 million. Trump made $25 million last year on Maralago alone, just that. So it's a business aspect of this too that they didn't put in the valuation. They can submit their own valuation since value is subjective. Value is based on the market. And they even talk about how in previous court cases, in New York too, juries and judges have found that generally it is the market value which provides the most reliable valuation for assessment purposes. New York itself has found that value is subjective, and that if the bank was able to obtain the proper information, do their own due diligence, and make their own valuation in which they voluntarily lent their money based on and took the risk based on, which means they used their own conditions and had access to all information that was accurate, it doesn't matter what Trump submitted. It really doesn't, because that never got used to make the decision in the first place. It goes on to say, defendants assert that overvaluations of $200 million are immaterial, as the New York Attorney General has produced no evidence to suggest that Ladder Capital, which is one of the people who lent Trump money, Ladder Capital would have been uncomfortable allowing President Trump to guarantee the 40 Wall Street loan, which is a property Trump has, if his net worth was only $1.9 billion. As the New York Attorney General contends, they further emphasize that Ladder Capital has received in excess of $40 million in interest, and Wall Street LLC has never defaulted under the loan. So not only did Trump pay the loan back, but the lender made a $40 million profit on the interest from the loan they gave Trump. So there was literally no victim in this. Trump got the loan, he paid it back with interest, and Ladder Capital made a $40 million profit. Now, you're going to love this because as I'm reading this, at the bottom here, you have 2 footnotes. And it's so ironic to me that the leftist Marxist people who are trying to put Trump in jail, these are the same people who are all upset about the greedy corporations, right? The big oil, the big banks, right? They're all pissed off at them for making so much profit and exploiting people, right? You can't make this shit up. The first one says the defendant borrowers did not default on any loans. The Attorney General admits that. But we only know that with hindsight. Markets are volatile and borrowers come in all shapes and sizes. The next borrower or the one after that might default. And if its financial disclosures are false, the lender might unfairly be left holding the bag. This will distort the lending marketplace and deprive other potential borrowers of the opportunity to obtain loans and create wealth. Basically, what they're saying there is that banks should not have the risk of what could happen in the future. They should be able to lend based off of the guarantee that the money will come back. And I'm sorry, but that's what the interest rate is for. The interest rate is there to appropriately calculate the risk. And they even acknowledge that in the next footnote. And this is where it's funny. You're probably going to laugh at this. The subject loans made the banks lots of money. They admit that. But the fraudulent statement of financial conditions cost the banks lots of money. The less collateral for a loan, the riskier it is. And a principle of loan accounting is that as risk rises, so do interest rates, which is correct. Thus, accurate statement of financial conditions would have allowed the lenders to make even more money than they did. So they're literally going after Trump, not because someone was victimized, not because someone lost money here, but because the banks didn't make enough money. The same people who are mad about these big corporations and banks profiting, they're mad because people have student loans where they got to pay this interest back. They're mad because the banks didn't make enough money on interest, and that's why they're going after him. Like, what a joke. So in the case of Maralago, he got an approval to use the property for a private and social club. And he did that because there is a loophole in the tax system that says if you're using it just for a private and social club and not just as a primary residence, you can pay less in property taxes. This is the government saying that he's allowed to do this. This is legal. And what the Attorney General is saying is because of this clause, because the land is limited in use under this agreement that Trump has, that takes away a substantial amount of value. Therefore, it can only be worth what the property tax assessor says it's worth. Donald Trump's financial disclosures between 2011 and 2021 value Mar-a-Lago at between $426,529,000 and $612 million, an overvaluation of at least 2,300% compared to the assessor's appraisal. Now, everyone in real estate knows that the property tax assessor values property far lower than the actual market value is. My last home was valued at around $175,000. I sold it right after that came out at like $350,000. And it's the government that sets that amount just for property taxes. By the way, this property brought in $25 million for Donald Trump annually. So you have to take that into account. Also, the potential revenue gain Trump got from the social aspect of the property, right? Trump had so many social gatherings with some of the most powerful people in the world prior to his presidency that would have opened up so many business opportunities for him and made him so much money that it's priceless. It really is. And whoever owns the property will be able to do the same. So Trump really can calculate that in. In an attempt to rebut the OAG's demonstration, the defendants rely on an opinion affidavit of Lawrence Moans, who they purport is the most accomplished and knowledgeable ultra-high net worth real estate broker in Palm Beach, Florida. Moans claims that the statement of financial condition were and are appropriate and indeed conservative. The Moans affidavit states in a conclusory fashion that because he believes the unique property offers to an elite purchaser the unparalleled opportunity to own an exclusive and extensive family compound in the most desirable sections of Palm Beach, the valuations in the statement of financial condition were reasonable and below my estimate for the market value of the property each year. So in a real estate professional was saying that Trump's valuation of $426 million to $612 million is actually very, very conservative and far lower than what he'd value it at. It is well stated that where the expert's ultimate assertions are speculative or unsupported by any evidentiary foundation, however, the opinion should not be given no probative force and is insufficient to withstand summary judgment. So basically he said, hey, it's not just the Trump organization saying it's worth this much. Real estate professionals are saying it's worth this much. Why don't we bring a professional in and he can tell you himself what he thinks the property value is? Okay, bring him in. He tells the attorney general, yeah, I think the property is probably about $1 billion. And the attorney general says, you don't have any objective proof of that. So no, your opinion is worthless. And our opinion as a judge who has never worked in real estate in his life is far more credible. In the footnote below that, it says, in his sworn disposition, when asked, who were the dozen or so qualified buyers that you were referencing in your report? This is the attorney general talking to the real estate professional. Lawrence Mones replied, I could dream up anyone from Elon Musk to Bill Gates and everyone in between, kings, emperors, head of states. But with net worths in the multiple billions, I don't know how many people in the world have a net worth of more than $10 billion, but I can think it's quite a number. There's a lot. Obviously, this court cannot consider an expert affidavit that is based on unexplained and unsubstantiated dreams. So what they're saying basically is that the market really has no value opinion. And just because there's someone out there willing to pay for it doesn't mean that's what the value is. Value needs to be objective. And because Trump can't offer some kind of objective value other than the $18 to $25 million property assessment, then it's worthless. So that means Trump could go out and have it appraised. He could have had the banks go and appraise it, which they probably did, by the way, and they still won't listen to him. He would have to sell it for him to actually come up with some kind of real value that would appease the court. Now, I just want to offer a perspective on this. I went and looked up 2 properties that had sold extremely close to Mar-a-Lago. Now, the first one is 1610 North Ocean Boulevard, Palm Beach, Florida. The lot size is 1.31 acres, and it has water access to the inland waterway. In 2019, that house sold for $25,500,000, which was approximately $2,278 per square foot. The home right now is currently listed at $77,900,000. Well, it's funny because you could say, well, the seller is overvaluing the property, right? In 2021, this very property was assessed for property tax purposes at $19,634,000. That's far lower than what the buyer would pay for this house. It's far lower than what the house actually sold for 2 years earlier. Now, that would be, if it was $2,278 a square foot, sold for $25,500,000. What's like? Let's just say it's 11,000 square feet, roughly. It's a big house, 1.31 acres. Maralago is 62,500 square feet. It has 128 rooms, and the ballroom itself is 20,000 square feet, which is twice the size of the house that I just stated. If you use what that house sold at in 2019, that $2,278 per square foot, the building itself on Maralago, not the 20 acres, not the value that comes with beach and inland waterway access, not the land value, just the building itself, the 62,500 square foot building, Maralago is worth about $142,375,000.